I'm hoping that what I'm going to take you through is not complicated. You have a phone. All right, so before I get into the procedure for the education assessment, this presentation is going to be basically two parts. Because before you think of doing an education assessment, you must understand what kind of missions you have. This picture of national level, right? So the first part of the presentation is going to speak about first simple basics about what the master's intensive is, what kind of sectors we look out for, what kind of interventions are there, support that process. Then from there we get into the actual education assessment steps. So let's look at the next slide. Yes, so like Mr. Simon, within the year program, there's what we call the we like to September. What we call the price agreement, abbreviated as PK. So within that price agreement, we have the body motivations and actually something what they call the advanced transparency framework, which gives us certain reporting motivations. And as part of our reports at the country, we also speak of our invention. Now, this has also been adopted in the guidelines for the Dccap, where we have in section 2, we do the inventory. The inventory being district specific, and then we look at the mitigation assessment. That's where we can identify so some of the key elements in the inventory. One is that you have to report on inventory arrangements. Now, at national level, we have what we call the working days, which are not considered because information comes from different sectors. So the idea is that at the district level, if you have working days that support you in developing an inventory information is that good for that sector. We'll talk about the sector. And basically, as an information that is provided, I want to call it environmental planning climate change. So it is more of the science arm than the real framework for the climate change. We did come up with guidelines from 1996 and these were 2006. So the ones used now, there are quite some findings that were in 2015. So that's what they was in the methodology that we use when we estimated our emissions. The other piece is the drop under the level of the process. The key category, basically saying, if you look at management in this sector or this subcategory, is critical and has a large contribution in terms of the vision. Right? And so we find probably at the national level part of the category in the health sector and then the positive sector. So we expect that at the beginning for the districts, we do the government plan, what are the category, which sector is subsector. I know most emissions are growing. Now, in terms of level this can use the arithmetic. I think that would be more very nice. But in terms of the trend assessment, we will be a five series. So maybe it's certain. The thing in the from 1995 was certain 2020, 2025. So you look at which category that is what we will very important. Then without the then you have the assessments. And also the other thing is not for sure. Time service consistency. So things like you can't go in the custom without preparing it. But for your sort of amount, if there's a grant for the then the district. The handicap and horizon, this just speaks of because we have 7 dinners classes in important. The city of the website, and then Microsoft site, and the right components of complex security, So when we talk about the problem, we have to see the things that to convert this to an equivalent code to the next thing. We get the potentials of people. So for example, to convert one children of an family from a website to one file by page. Because it is that much broken in the must be. All right, let's go to the next. So idea, it's important in the culture editions of famous classes. There are basically three things required. One, the activity data. Activity data is country specific data. So for example, if you look at the sector of agriculture or livestock, right? We find that the activity data that we look out for livestock is, for example, the population, the cattle population, oats and the like. That's a very good data. So the data is good. It describes the extent to which you might expect, but the only might have at the sector of we look at activity data in the sense of that it was something common in our field. And then we multiply that by an emission factor. Emission factor as a fiscal coefficients to quantify how much emission volume was, how much per unit for that activity. And then if the gas that flows from that sector is mentioned of the dioxide, and then how we convert it to the dioxide, they will multiply by the global warming. So this is just a simple calculation that we use. And like I mentioned, there is other people by the climate change. And this guidelines look at these four sectors. There's the energy sector. Now, energy is inclusive of transport. It is about energy use, but also the transport. Industrial processes and look at this. There are certain activities, for example, industries. So we look at some industries, we have the air processing, which will CO2 emissions. Then we have the food is one of the agricultural forest for land use. This kind of land use, we have wetlands, we have settlements, we have grasslands, and yes, about forestry, wastelands, settlements, grasslands, wetlands. And then there's one about other land which is this and this stuff one. And then it was a measure of components. So this guidelines are available online. We personally describe they give you guidance on how you collect the data, how you measure the uncertainties, how you select the different methods, how to keep up the analysis, how to do your quality assurance and then the verification of the result. Now, for any inventory that you intend to do, it's based on 6 principles, following the CAP principles. These are these principles that will guide to ensure that there should be some kind of standard in any inventory that is recorded, right? So the first is transparency, accuracy, consistency, comparability, and completeness. Now, so with transparency, you basically start looking at you have sufficient and clear documentation so that even if someone who has not been part of the process comes to look at the inventory, they're able to ascertain of actually your estimated emissions based on the methodology, based on the available data, and based on the correct methods. And then the next thing is accuracy. So for you to be accurate, you must not overestimate or underestimate. There's always a tendency where you find you might decide that you have data. Take an example of your employee job, and then because you know that
recording in progress.
You realize that because of what comes from the oil and gas, the emissions before actually decide to underestimate them. So that is not acceptable. In terms of accuracy of the inventory. Then we have consistency. So basically, this is the same like associated across all years, especially within the time series. So that if, for example, my inventory in 2015, and then someone, then I have an event of 2016, I should have done the same as that process so that it can be consistent. That's what the case can be. Comparability, if Kasisi does as exactly, the inventory should be done using methods and that ensure that you share it and compare what is being needed in assessing what is needed. You share it. That's the methods. Not really the same data, but the same quality of the data. Be able to justify what difference it is estimated more than this. Right? Then the last principle. Completeness. So basically, you're reporting for all the categories and sources and gases. So, like I told you, energy industries, manufacturing industry, transportation, that is, for example, use energy that is also at the level of business entities. So the idea is that we try as much as that is available from all categories that you can, but also from all the different classes that you can report. So that is just brief problem. So that's just a brief problem. So in terms of the methodology, I just wanted to make a mention that there are basically 3 tiers under which we report. The tier 1 methodology is the simplest method, and it is still what we use even at national level. So expect that even at district level, as they prepare your inventories and your loss classes, they still rely on tier 1 method. So the tier 1 approach, you have your activity data, and then under the IPCC guidelines, you have to go before the emission factors. So these emission factors are being calculated based on emissions. So there's an emission factor, for example, for Africa, that we look at for a certain amount of fuel burnt, maybe by this type of car, what is its equivalent in terms of the emission factor. So at national level, we're still at this tier 1. Simply because as a country, we don't have country-specific emission factors, and so imagine this will cascade down to the district level as well. We'll be basing on a tier 1 approach. As we go to tier 2, then the diagram has become more intense. And at tier 3 level, you basically be more than even inventory specific. So I know also on the global scale, most countries, legacy countries like us, we report on the tier 1, tier 2, even the developers still strong in that. There are not many countries that are in the tier 3 approach. So, I really made mention of the key category analysis. I think I can speak this. I don't know how to test, but absolutely, it is the level assessment, and then there's a trend assessment where you look at the time series, right? So what is important to note is that when you do this key category analysis, you understand which sectors you have more in terms of the different actions, but also it helps you as a prioritize so that you can use as calculations that you perform that sector. Yes, so the other aspect of it is the data. I just wanted to highlight some of the principles, as you all know that any reporting system that is very important, right? So that I told you have to be able to get activity data from each of the sectors that you're looking at. So it's important that as a district you put in place some kind of formal data collection activity, whether they are done annually, but you know that okay, if we're collecting data on West, probably you're looking at data
terms of how much data is deposited into landfill. Are you able to track that data across the year? Into the next year and into the next year. If you're looking at the data, for example, in livestock, are you able to tell us that these are the number of cows we had in the district in this year, these are the number of cows we had the next year and the like. So if you can put in place a formal kind of arrangement for consistent with this data, it becomes easy for you as you generate your inventories and as you report. And then, of course, you know that these procedures are necessary for you to process existing data as well as if you need to generate data. There are times, of course, where you may have data for 25, then you another survey, maybe so of course the data that you can use, you can extrapolate it according to data and three ways that across so that you have a consistent time series. So I don't think I need to mention this text because this is part of what Mr. Simon presented earlier. But the most important thing is as you start to look for data, first of all, you have to what time series you're looking at, what sectors do you have, and you have the data available, and then what level if they're interested in. Then you also define the format. For example, this data will come from different sectors, right? So are you going to receive this data in form of spreadsheets? Are they going to use just tables, or are they going to use data in terms of reports and the like? So you have to, whoever is in charge of supervising the law from the inventory process should be able to ascertain what type of formats they want to start. And then also, many times as we do the inventories, there are certain assumptions we make. So you have a description of all those assumptions that have been made. For example, if you find if someone, for example, is looking at livestock, usually this is the example, but you find you might not be able to do a survey of the livestock. But you can understand that based on previous data is a growth rate maybe of 2% in the population. So that's an assumption making. Whereas it is an unequivocal assumption, one expert assumption, you still have to clearly define that these are assumptions that have been made, so that someone who is doing the fact checks on the data is able to understand that this has a certain level of accuracy which is being upgraded. Then the other thing is on the things and timescales. I told you, best place to this is collected annually, so that you put report on an annual basis. So you have your consistent time series if you do this collection on an annual basis. Then the third part talks about, of course, reference documentation. How are you going to reference this documentation that you have used in your estimation, your emissions? But also, where is the source of this information you have taken from? Because then, if someone comes to check the data you got, so this data we got it from production, this was the period, this is the person who able to access the report that because, and then it was available on such and such a data. Yes, so now I just wanted to give us an introduction into the inventory because the mitigation assessment speaks to what comes from the inventory. Because ideally, if you come up with options to reduce emissions, you must first understand how much you need before you can say you're going to do options to reduce emissions. And that's where the mitigation assessment comes in. And I'm sure you all know what mitigation means, right? Right? Yes. This side is very quiet.
Then we are sure.
Yes, so basically, if you look at any efforts to reduce the greenhouse gases limit or to enhance carbon sinks are basically those that capture and sequester, right? Yes, so any of those activities, as you implement them, that's what we call climate change mitigation. And of course, there's a whole lot of policies and measures. I just try to describe in different sectors, for example, and transport, things to do with fuel efficiency, electric vehicles, shifting to public transportation, and the like. This is just highlight that there are, from each and every sector, there's a broad coordination, all mitigation policies, only just that you can. So, a little bit of the science. where all this is coming from, right? And at the global level, over the past 30 years, it has been reported that the emissions are reaching about 59 gigagram tons carbon dioxide equivalent. And that was in 2019. Vis-a-vis 38 kilograms, so you can see in over a 30-year period, the emissions are increased by 38 gigagram tons. This is about 38 trillion, 50 trillion tons, right? 50 trillion tons of CO2 over a 30-year period. Of course, that is an average of about 55% increase over the 30-year period. And this is the science from IPCC. Now, the science from IPCC is based on, of course, various studies from different countries. So they go to different countries to have various studies and various reports that have been published. And we do reports under the UN framework, our emissions within our national reports, which we do on a 4-year basis. And then we had what we used to call the biannual reports, which were every 2 years. But this has transitioned into what we call biannual transparency reports. So now the country is preparing to pay its first biannual transparency report. So when the Paris Agreement came into place, the idea was that how do we have kind of treaty that we can limit our global the temperature rise to about 1.5 increase, right, above the pre-industrial levels. And so when we did the global statistics was 2025, we realized that when you look at the indices of all the countries that submitted, we're still way below achieving the 1.5 temperature increase. And so that's why countries are being called upon to be more ambitious in their next one of NDCs. I remember even Mr. Simon was speaking about the NDCs. So I figured I should just make mention of that. Then we'll go into what it actually means to mitigation assessment. So mitigation assessment is the process. Mitigation impact. Now, these two concepts are very important when you're talking about mitigation assessment. It's what they call the baseline scenario. Baseline scenario basically is your business as usual scenario, right? So you don't do anything. What does the trajectory look like? So the baseline scenario is basically a reference case that presents events or conditions most likely to occur in the absence of any mitigation. And then within that, once you understand what your trajectory is like the business as usual case, then you develop mitigation scenarios. Okay. If my baseline is like this, if I implement action C, what kind of trajectory will it look like? These are not what we call the mitigation scenarios. So this kind of conditions most likely to occur in the presence of mitigation action. So this kind of identify. So your mitigation impact is you get this baseline that you have developed your business as usual, and then you look at what you have achieved. So this is the impact of your mitigation action. And in determining the mitigation impact, there are 2 things we also look at. There's what called an ex-ante assessment and then the ex-post assessment. Now, with the ex-ante assessment, we look at the present year, right? And then we look at these are your historical emissions assumed. How do your emissions up to say 2025, right? So we do this and say, okay, if we don't implement that, how do our trajectory look like in terms of emissions, right? Then we say, okay, now, and we need to come up with emissions that we have in our updated emission talks of 24.7. We implement that, we use that, the 24.7. Now, this is not an ex-ante assessment, but there's what they call ex-post assessment, which looks at it in terms of historical what was achieved. So you have your historical emissions, and then at some point maybe you could say 2025, right? That is what the 2025 and 2015 and 2025, right? So, you do the part of historical shows that 2015, you do what the baseline scenario, and then you come up with mitigation scenarios to see if this will most likely be a scenario of action that you have done already, because now this is in the past. You want to see if you achieve any mitigation, that's what we call an ex post assessment. So, I have this little example here. We're going to do some little mathematics. But this is not really because I don't drive an electric vehicle. But I know someone who drove one or who drives one. So let's assume between 2000 and 2015, this coincidence. Yes. Between 2000 and 2015 was the drive a petrol vehicle, right? City is 15 kilometers from office. So which means it's been a 2-4 drive. That's 30 kilometers, right? And then assuming is electric, still will cover the same distance, but now between 2016 and now he has been the electric vehicle. And because still very like his job, he at least attends 20 days in a month, right? So you find that our baseline scenario, in this case, would have been if Stephen had remained driving his goal even after 2016. So historically, he was driving this car until this point when he bought the vehicle. But if he had continued with his goal, this would be the baseline scenario. Now, the fact that he gets an electric vehicle, this becomes an mitigation scenario. It's trying like this. In the emissions that about food crystal from driving the petrol vehicle. So ideally it means if he's doing 115 kilometers in directions going to office and back, times 2, 20 days and then a month, so that means must have covered 7,200 kilometers in a year. It would mean, because all that means, if you look at here, I have emission factors, right? So these are emission factors I picked from the IPCC database. So it says in the emission factor, on top of the emission factor, this is the factor for the electricity grid. Right? So it is about 0.5 kilograms of the dioxide equivalent per kilowatt hour. Now, the electrical consumption is about 0.2 kilowatts. And then for a typical petrol car, we are looking at the growth that is used to drive. The emission factor is about 160 grams. 160 kilograms, and we looks at convert this to kilograms. Convert it to kilograms about 0.16, right? Yeah. So, which means under our baseline, what would have been emitting would be the 0.16, which is that emission factor, times this activity data, which would give us 1,250 kilograms of carbon dioxide per year, right? But because he went and put an electric car, which is our mitigation scenario, you see that the 0.5, which is the good emission factor, then is the consumption, and then multiplied by the distance he covers, you see that he's still emitting less than what he would have been emitting if he was driving his small petrol car. So, in essence, it means that his mitigation impact would be the 1,252 minus the 720, which is about 432 tons of emission reductions each year. But that is an individual, just to do the concept. Now, of course, we are looking at it now at district level, right? Not individual level, we're looking at district level or even at national level. So there's a stepwise approach. We use what we do for the economic mitigation assessment. Now, this is a 7-step approach, and it's categorized into two. The first The first three steps of this are preparatory work, right? The preparatory work for the mitigation assessment, and the other from step 4 to step 7. So the first thing that we do as we are doing the mitigation assessment is to assess the situation and organize the process. So, like I told you, this is preparatory. First, we're going to determine and prioritize the objective of the assessment. Why are you going to do this mitigation assessment? We're doing vertical. Yes, we're doing vertical, but what are the objectives of vertical? Right? You have to understand what are the objectives, why you're doing this assessment. Is it that what you're going to do is going to contribute to national objectives or within national or your district plans and the like? The next is we're going to look into existing studies. Again, studies of the similar nature that have been conducted because they will not be replicating what should be done, right? But also, what is the current capacity of the people who will do this work or collect the data and the data? Then also look at what kind of data is available in the district. When you go into the registry, what kind of data is available? You have data on, say, your consumption across the district. Is that really available? Yes, we are. No, what can we do? Collect the data. Then you also define who are the key participants, what's the stakeholders of this process. We want data for livestock, who are going to the production office, or going to engage also. There could be some groups that deal with that or that deal with cattle or that deal with. Now, like in energy, you have these 5 6 scopes that are dealing with energy, the volumes and the like. So you have to identify, categorize all the different stakeholders and what contribution they have to the process. Then at the second step, we now define the scope. And the scope, we look at it in 2 aspects. One is the sector scope. Are you going to look at all the 4 sectors as I highlighted, where you have energy, transport, then the food sector, then the industrial sector, and product use, and the waste, or because of challenges in the data that you have looked at in the step 1, you're going to specify, maybe you say, as a district, we don't have data on fuels in the district, so we may not look at emissions from the energy sector, but we can look at emissions from the food sector and maybe the waste sector. There are other districts where you find we don't have the manufacturing industry, so you will find there's no need of doing emissions under the technical sector. So that is on the sector scope. The next is on the technological scope of the technological scope. So we're going to look at what kind of technology there is someone who was saying they wanted to have cable cars. But are cable cars feasible for you? And how costly is that technology? Right? So you have to look at what is the scope of technology. Is it going to be limited based on the cost, or it's availability, or are there any conflicts with any other national objectives or priorities? So the third thing is then you design methodology of how you're going to do assessment. So your methodologies, first of all, should be consistent for your assessment, but also consistent with what outputs you want to get, but also the available data. Right? So there are things like economic outputs, costs and benefits, and so methodology are affordable in terms of collecting the data. You give up investment money to this data on the scale of the available. Are you going to integrate maybe sector-specific analysis and everything? Yes, or you going to have commission studies at the right. And then there are also other criteria that you can take into consideration. For example, the modeling options that will be done, right? Because if you decide to use a certain modeling tool, you should ensure that there's capacity within the district, or it should be able to get someone who has the capacity to explain the models that you have the capacity and the results. Other things like issues to do with transparency, other issues are, for example, the tools will be using resource ability, what is paid for. So because all these have a pay on the cost. So as you done that, the next thing is to collect the data, because like we already mentioned, you're going to collect data at the level of submission, which is available within the district. If you're able to collect data, for example, in livestock for some county, and not the data will be, if it's not at the level of say parish or sub-county, but still reported is also district level. So the level of reservation depends on the level of the people. And then we just mentioned some resources that will be helpful for you. You can look at what has been done at national level, since the guide you can be kind of data that you require. Energy statistics, means of energy strategy, energy balance, and use statistics at national level, that's how we move around the energy and the statistics through the district level. Also, what's important is the national statistics. So don't look at issues to do with GDP, you don't look at issues to do with population growth, because then these also play a part as you're doing your scenarios, as you're mapping your scenarios. Of course, there are international data studies that you can look at, but that shouldn't be the first priority. The first priority should be what data we have as a district. You can collect this data before you can keep producing data from different studies, so it's accessible online global data sets. Yes. But are we still here?
Yes, that's to mention that just with a little bit data. These key producers, especially under the Google, such a keeping them when running the scenarios. Because everything you are trying to project is using how the operation is going, suction patterns. So it is one of the data which is really very important. That we do the mitigation scenarios. Everything is given for the consumption. Consumption is looking at how the operation is being structured and how it's created. First, when we want to look at the talent of waste related, for example, are looking at the operation is and then you can use that as an enabler to estimate how emissions likely to grow, based on the operation growth and the result of the. So really sometimes is the engine for bringing all these models, and then the GDP also try to move at that level. But it may be very difficult to find the GDP at this level. So what may be important is that we use the national GDP. That's scenario. So I think that is something that this will have to take into consideration, that nobody can do mitigation assessment when you're doing advertising. Exactly. I think before you came, I told them that if we have these elements within our district and we have not been collecting data on them, it is not meant that we leave them out, but we carry them as actions, including the DPP, because the DPP every after 5 years you have group increase, either update or maintain as state. So meaning that those actions where data may be required, but have not been collecting, then we take it as an action, start with that data. But the next round group, the DPP, where we never had emissions, maybe in a certain category, we will have to use 5 years to take model, added into the district emission profile.
The subsequent years. Yes, thank you so much, Commissioner. So, as you have the collection of the data and the next is now you come up with the scenarios. And I told you, you have a scenario as you have what we call the business as usual scenario, and then the mitigation scenario. The business as usual scenario is what we are calling the baseline scenario in this case. So it just gives you some kind of description of a possible future developments in the absence of any new mitigation actions that you do. Now, I should stress that when you're doing the baseline scenario, it's not basically extrapolate, see how many emissions are to them, you just extrapolate, right? That is not how you're supposed to do. You're supposed to take into consideration issues to do with the demographics, population growth. You're supposed to take in issues to do with the macroeconomic issues, the GDP growth, what is it like over the kind. What will be able to determine, baseline scenario. Now, this is just a graphic for internet to show you what look like, what your growth look like. But key to note is that when it comes to business as usual scenario, there is no common definition for it. It is specific or defined by the district. Now, for example, I could come from, say, me, I'm from Kapelagyo. So I could say Kapelagyo, for us, our business as usual is we just do everything as is. We don't care whether there are any new policies in place that we're implementing or whether there are any activities that are being implemented. Now, someone else from Bushen will say, no, look, for us, because we have these policies that are being put in place and we're starting to implement them, they form part of my business as usual, right? So you look at it's basically user defined, or in this case we say it will be district defined. As district defined, what we maintain in business as usual scenario. We look at, for example, policies that are recently established. How does it include policies that are directed at reducing emissions or not? Are you going to look at it? You might have projects that are already planned, already ongoing, and you say, okay, because we know the potential of these projects, we can still maintain them as part of our business as usual. Someone else may say, no, because they have not yet been implemented, I'll still have them as part of my mitigation scenario. So it's important enough that the baseline scenario, usually you find one business as usual scenario is user defined. So after you are developing your baseline scenario, the next is you're going to identify a host of mitigation actions and then you screen them. I remember Mr. Second was talking about multi-criteria assessment. This snapshot of that. But basically, you're doing systematic screening to determine which options include your mitigation scenarios that you're going to screen, right? So you want to establish a criteria, certain indicators that you use. For example, if you would identify the options for each of these sectors. This got a certain criteria, and we want to look side. So just yes, so for example, you have a host of mitigation options, and then you screen them against certain schedule criteria. So keep in mind is, for example, significant solution. Because this is a mitigation action, this is a very important indicator to look out for. If you're claiming it's a mitigation action and you're screening at least this potential in terms of this commission, it's a mitigation action. It's now an adaptation, adaptation action. So you look at that, then the other thing you look at is the execution with cost effectiveness. Now, within mitigation assessments, you have something called the marginal abatement cost. So what this basically means is that if I have an activity like, say, I have an activity like improving feed for cattle, right? If I give cattle improved feed, it improves their productivity. I don't need to have 20 cows to have 100 liters of water. If I can improve their productivity with their feeding, and I just have 5 cows in the same amount of milk production efficiency, right? So you're going to look at the activity. So what we mean by the marginal abatement cost is that you look at the activity without the cost. If the activity has a high potential to reduce emissions, and then is very costly, and then there's an activity that has a high potential to reduce but is cheaper, then it makes more sense for you to get the cheaper option, but with a high ability to reduce emissions. Of course, other criteria look at is feasibility. It's the same one. We already spoke about feasibility. You need to think about if you find someone who's telling you what to set up maybe cable cars in the district, yet you don't even have that much people using because most people will go to one it is a rural kind of area. You can't implement certain issues, the actually is not feasible for what you want to implement it. So why would we do that as part of the role mitigation actions? But also keep to notice that as part of the screening, try to identify options that are consistent with the national development plans and the district development plans, because this is why the first point of getting resources, if the activity fits within the district plan, but also fits within the national priorities, you can't use a resource financing from the local country financing vis-a-vis having to look for financing also. Of course, the issues to do with equity, environmental impact, and then predictability. If you do this action in this place, is it possible for it to be replicated in another place within the same district? If you do it in this account, is this an action that can be replicated across the district? It makes more sense than having an action that can only be done in one part of the district, and then the rest of the district can't have a similar action, similar mitigation action taking place. Yes, then, so after you've done the screening and how you possible activities, then you develop the field mitigation scenarios. So you can pick a number of activities, run them through the scenario process, and identify how much they will reduce the emissions. So the mitigation scenarios basically will reflect for you what the future will look like, or possibly look like if you implemented this hospital. What is going by the mitigation efforts. So we do notice that these scenarios to take into account the priorities, district level, but also national level, the objectives, but also the circumstances in this. Right? And then also they should not simply reflect current plans, instead they should assess what would be the potential achievable based on the goals that you have set in the scenario. That's why again, Mr. Sema was talking about net zero, and then there are also scenarios of that carbon neutrality. So as we do that, as we do these scenarios, take into account these different things. So I think that is the point of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Please clap for that again. But if we have any comments, questions, that is an assumption.
Thank you. I think Commissioner already has mentioned my word is that why the social the data. Your voice, I think, every mentioned the national population census has not for the commission. But I think also UPOS has lots of other censuses that have done, for example, lens for analysis. So I would think that maybe that would also help the people who are going to be able that to scan through what UPOS has. Because they really do a lot of work and some of the information is not used till and then they do another one and they file as well. But what they just cannot. It's very important that we perhaps look at that and make use of it as one of the other options.
Actually, on that, Google has a whole website where they publish even Excel files you can download. It's like a repository of so much data on the studies that they have done from all sectors, including waste, inflation, and all that.
I think what is important, what is coming out of this? There is an adaptation assessment, we have talked about this yes, no mitigation. You can't do it when you have that. And they are basing on the data which is organized. Because what's going to be followed is sticking to the jurisdiction. We call that as the Dcaps are looking at prediction what elements. So whereas who has this data, also the district have what we call the district abstracts. Isn't it? They also have the data, but we are saying that not all the data may be applied. That's why I said that and also the format we use is data may be required, also may be a little bit different. Isn't it? Because we are dealing with modeling tools. You may have the data, but the format in which you are going to the data is actually not what is required in the modeling tools, isn't it? So there's that additional work which might be required to be done. Isn't it? Or we'll be for the data. Let us use the example of livestock, for example, isn't it? And what I've been doing is about the egg count. How many do you have, isn't it? But for you to run the missions, somebody will need additional information about the breeding type, isn't it? They need additional information about the weight of the animals, isn't it? You need additional information about the feeding characteristics, meaning that you may be going to this information, but not disaggregate it, isn't it? Or some elements might be what? Missing out. So this is what we're going to talk about. Because the required might be detail of what we've been doing. Then number two, there is that information that is may not be correctly, but you can get from the national level. For example, issues to deal with the land survey maps. Isn't it? We have a GIS unit which has been operating under what? NFA, isn't it? The land cover maps, even when other institutions have been used, I think we have that institution added the latest GIS data and information, even that other institutions have been asking for it. So meaning that we also ought to use that kind of information. Because you have not been doing mapping of your forest resources, but the land survey maps, data sets, which the former national now in the main ministry can also try to help in delineating your location. So it is about data that is required, but getting more localized data, it makes a lot of sense. Because using high level data is not causal to accuracy, isn't it? Not too much of accuracy, as opposed to getting data from the local corrections. So it is very data information which is required in simple terms. Maybe the district will collect information about the soil types, isn't it? But here looking at the mission can be of the soils. What are those elements that you're looking at that is going into the modeling tools? Then complete mission from the soils, isn't it? So this information might be there, but not correct on the parameters that will be used to compute and calculate what the emissions coming out of a certain sector. So this is why, as you do this, the most important element is that when you go into build your capacity, what is that tool that you want to use and what parameters does the tool look out for? And do we correct that information? So that is some of the things that we may need to take into consideration. So it is very data information, but where there are gaps, then you can only harvest the more in the data collection and surveys.
Yeah, and just to add to that, one critical thing is that you should always document and reference the data that you've used. So if tomorrow you're not there and someone else came and looked at this inventory, you should be able to find, okay, this data was sourced from such and such a place. This is the source of this data. So if someone wanted to follow up, becomes much easier for them. So whereas we always need to use locally available data, we also advise that ensure that always document whatever data has been used, because then it gives more transparency in the inventory into your reporting.
Also, the other element which we need to take into consideration, because data is capital intensive, as we all know. So we see an opportunity that districts which have institutions like universities or whatever, provided you have provided your data gaps, that is, you can share with these institutions, you have all students who are looking for such things. Okay? Always there are students who are looking for such areas, and what their research at the end of the day contribute to the national development, isn't it? So if you know about the data requirement, the areas where you have gaps, it is not bad to go to maybe Mitoma University. That's an example. And you go to talk to those people as district staff. Now, these are the areas that we have seen that if people have to do research in our district, we have data gaps in this area. Those who are doing energy sciences, they know that there is a data gap in here. If they come to do research, they are helping also to collect some bit of information and they work with you. So until when you have this such kind of things, is when you can try to look into addressing the required data gaps. So all these are valuable opportunities that you can invest in. And also, we take note that there are also civil society organizations that can contribute to studies. But are those studies purposeful for you as a district, isn't it? So if you also can guide on that, then there could be other avenues to do those surveys using the civil society organizations that might be interested in doing any study within your district, isn't it? So these are the elements that you can help. But doing it perfectly
It was faithful in the vision.
now I see that there's no more questions from Isaac. Let me just put on some question. All what said from the morning about the Dcaps, isn't it? Now this brings us back to the question. Do we have resident capacity? The capacity in terms of finance, the capacity in terms of know-how, because we said that it is not only about consulting. It's not only about consultants. It is when you have resident capacity in the district, you can do this. Isn't it? When you don't have, then you think about you can get external people to help us do this. Okay? But while the external people are helping you to do that, isn't it? They should not work alone. You need to understand how was this income for them. We have a tendency of getting people contracted, they do for us, and we don't pay attention to what they have done for us, isn't it? So, getting involved, isn't it? And I think for the first time, when we think about consultant service, there has to be a very big component of capacity building of the district in how to do this, because you are not always going to get consultant all the time, because it is a process which requires maybe after 5 years, you look at it, isn't it? So if you just contact people, come, they do it for you, then you go. Next time they come, they do it for you. Then how will you be capacity maintain it? Okay? So we could think about several things, how this can be addressed. So now that one leaves us a question, and also goes back to my second last presentation about disputes with Dcaps. Those who are aware, those who are not aware. Now, if you reflect, for example, saying assessment, do you think assessor has done more of that? What have we talking about? No, it's just a question to ask yourself. Anyway, if you are able to do the adaptation component, you don't need to contract for it. That will do it by yourself. Isn't it? If you are able to do the mitigation one, do it by yourself. Don't spend money on that one, because if you can't do it, if you are able to do gender and capacity assessment by yourself as a district, because everything that you kick off, it means that you're reducing the cost. Isn't it? All those things that you are able to do, that's why you can do it in bills. Okay? You can do it in bills. Better if you have adequate resources to do it at one go. That's why we talk about the roadmap, isn't it? If the district has capacity to do an adaptation assessment, don't spend money on it, do it by yourself. Man, I'm talking about not to get it done, talking about money over resource person. You get it? But you have to invest in getting it done, moving the community, etc. Now, if you have the capacity of doing the mitigation analysis, or what Isaac is talking about, don't spend money on that. In terms of getting resource person, the money that you have to spend on it on how to get this data and that kind. So that's what we will have to think broadly. What is available? Remember when I said that where we start from, isn't it? What is needed? What is available? Isn't it? If data on livestock is there and can really serve the purpose, we did, isn't it? If data on waste is there, isn't it? That one we did. But if data in every is not there, this is where we have to invest in simple tasks.
Thank you. I just have to inquire. According to experience of common the 4 districts, I just needed a little highlights how they managed to achieve this. And also, I'm not seeing example. And also wanted to let you know that according to the people I tried to ask, even the one of Kasese consumed a lot of money. I tried reviewing it to see whether I can involve the one of the release. But even what you're saying that was not complete had consumed a lot of money, around over 100 million, which I think we as districts may not be having all that at once or within even weeks. So that is one thing of the financial challenge that we have. And then on the issue of the consultants, yes, it is true. There are some areas that we do not manage, the ones of data. But however, even as we do, I think if we also maybe have reviewers so that they keep us on track. If I'm sorry to use the one that I said, I guess if there was a reviewer to keep them on track, to show them the direction, then there would be having something being approved by the department. So that we need to have somebody pushing, especially for those that have interest and have already taken steps.
Okay, first and foremost, when we were developing this guideline, one that we used, we also provided what we call the generic terms of reference. Okay, this one we can share. What expertise is needed, isn't it? We provided what we call the generic terms of reference. Isaac is a part of this 27. That analysis said, okay, it was intended that when you are into contracting, at least you know the nature of the product you are looking for. Okay? Generic terms of what? Reference. Number two, in terms of the reviewers, that one don't get worried. That's why I said that we are not going to do for you, but we are there to guide. Okay? If you have something to do with the anything out of that, and you are doing it, please be available to guide. Okay? In the process, we are available to guide as the department in charge of climate change and carbon trading. That one, don't get one. Now, why does I say it like that? At first, they did not consult us. Though they know that we have to do that. We came at last, and that's why I'm confident in telling you that it has gaps, because we have looked at what they have done. Okay? Then number two, in terms of the money, even the money you are thinking about, first of all, it depends on what you have and what is the main bidder, isn't it? So the money is relative. So, but this is how I know it is a lot of money, which you guys. When you even talk about 100 billion, there are districts which have spent even 400 billion. Okay, 400 million, but it depends on the size of the districts. Because most of the money actually goes into the CRBS. Because you have a lot of community and consultation across all the local governments, all sub-counties and county councils, all parishes and wards. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. And you can only sample in the villages and cells. We are going to ask. When you are doing the CRBA, to go to identify the community adaptive capacity, isn't it? Isn't it? community adaptive capacity. This is a district climate change action plan. All sub-counties and county council, all parishes and wards. That's what you understand what I'm talking about. You always sample in the villages and cells. To have adequate representation, isn't it? So if you have point local government and this one have 3, you're not going to spend the same, isn't it? So most of the money goes in that collection on the part of the CRVA. But now, if you have a commitment to do a CRVA, isn't it? If you have a commitment to do a Dccap and you have a roadmap, don't suffer alone. There are partners who are willing to support that. Apparently speaking, the UNCDF is going to support 14 districts where they're operating. Now, why I'm saying partners, because we also talk about partners, that the government partners, in the districts where you're working, can you ensure that you support them to do the Dcaps? We're not telling you to go everywhere, but in the districts where you are working, please support them to develop the Dcaps. Isn't it? So, provided you have elaborated what you want to do, you have clear terms of references. Now, partners that are coming to you, put it as a priority because it has a basis. It is a requirement by law that you have to do. It is easy for a partner to support something which is a requirement by law. Isn't it? So, you document all what you want to do. Now, if you have the Germans operating your business, when you meet with them, say, we have a priority here, let's go to this one. It's good, isn't it? Now, the partner can come in full stream, in totality, or can choose to support your company. Maybe adaptation company is assessed, and you know, as we have advertised them, that means that component is covered, isn't it? If another partner may come, we need to support the mitigation part, isn't it? So it works like that, because you never get the money as the district to do all of this one. I have told you, I have worked on Amayo and Ibuyukwe with a funding budget from the Iceland government or embassy. The water for people organization supported Namayi, Kamwenge, and Kabuda, and their versions are almost there. Okay? So the district contributed less, but they use the partners they have to ask them to support. Okay? Now, in one of the districts that the local under UN Catholic Government Fund, again they are going back to Kasese because there is a government. They are going back to Kasese. Isn't it? They are going back to Kasese to help support that. And they have contracted, you are from Kasese, they have contracted with a firm called Oiko. Have they heard of finding? Whose terms of reference have approved that? And why did they want that to be done? Okay? Now, for them, they are only going to respond to the adaptation needs. They say that you still have a gap on doing mitigation assessments, and before when you get this information, is what you consider upwards, to develop what? Develop the Dccap. So sometimes we don't go closely, depending on what is available. For the CRVA. Okay, that is good because when they come, they will find, because they have to assess where are you. That is the starting point. We are not at the same level. What is available? Isn't it? So they will help to undertake that. So now I think there's a question here.
Me, I just wanted to find out from you, is that opportunity, what is a climate risk assessment report? And how does that document their cost? Because we equally have a request from Kasese to help them develop on what practices and developing that risk assessment.
How about you, Kasese?
When I looked at that report, me, I don't see that.
Okay. There is what you call CRVA, climate risk and vulnerability assessment. Okay? Now, report is what you call a climate risk assessment. You are not here the morning, I tried to explain that. Now, the CRVA requires you to go to climate analysis. So now we get to summarize it. That you do climate analysis. Climate analysis is not that you identifying this. Climate analysis, you are only establishing how climate has been and how is it predicted to be. That is climate analysis, isn't it? Now, when you go to collect the data in terms of exposure, sensitivity, adaptive capacity, then you are generating the vulnerability in line to the climate. Okay? Now, if you eventually be able to do because the risk of climate change, by looking at the exposure, you are looking at this vulnerability, and then you are determining the risk for climate change. So now, a combination of all of this brings on the climate risk report that I'm talking about. The risk is when there is able to identify the magnitude of the problem and the ratios of which this problem can exist. So it is covered in what we call the CRVA. So now some people will ask you, what are climate hazards? Hazard always look at identifying that there is this flood, there is this landslide, there is this, and that is just a hazard, isn't it? If you want to make it a risk and vulnerability, assess exposure, isn't it? Assess sensitivity, assess adaptive capacity, determine vulnerability, and to go to the risk, then you get a combination of the exposure versus vulnerability and you determine the risk. So that's how it works. Okay?
Yeah, thank you very much for that clarification. But also, you almost okay, kind of was in terms of asking how much will this component cost? And you almost telling us. So from your own experience, I want to find out what are the average costs? Which one costs higher, which one costs lower, and so on. What they are different components, CRV, EHD, capacity mix, and the analysis.
I have told you, depends on how you structure this. Even capacity mix, isn't it? And so you can use it, you can merge data as part of the data for the CRV. You can just disaggregate it and analysis. Isn't it? But I was giving you insights that the CRV costs more, and the element is because you have to go to the communities and get additional data and information on the element of adaptive capacity. Isn't it? I told you, you cannot use spatial analysis to determine adaptive capacity. Isn't it? It is just to go and ask people, for example, isn't it? Do you have access to water? Is that water adequate? Is it clean? What is the distance you move? That's some of the questions asking, isn't it? What is the distance you move? All of this, you got them as narrative, but you have to quantify it, generate figures. Isn't it? Now, that one, just to tell you, and you go to the community. So that's why I said that component actually is the one which consumes a lot of money and it makes this to be more expensive than these others. Now, assuming that you have all the data as Isaac presented for mitigation, you have your population, you know the information on the Google has to help you to correct it, and you know it, isn't it? I can go and do what we call vegetation cover analysis, isn't it? From the data sets for which you own the ministry there, I can assure you that you have information about the fuel consumption, assuming that the county councils in your districts are providing data in terms of the tonnage of waste, isn't it? That one is simple in terms of the costing, so complicated in terms of analysis, isn't it? Yeah? So it might not be as expensive as it's. Okay. That's what I'm telling you. So that one means that you're only dealing with experts, fees, for analysis, all has to do for this information. Unless when you don't have the information, you either hold on it or you make it as a documentation in the next Dccap, When you have information, that you also cover that in part, isn't it? So ideally, the CRVA takes more money as compared to these other two components. But what we are giving is just an estimation. It depends on how wide the district is, isn't it? So that one also matters. Some districts are not bigger than others, isn't it? Maybe that the local government might make a bit fewer as compared to others, isn't it? So the element of expenditure might also be not the same. Okay? Okay, so I think we are closing this chapter, moderator. The question which is behind, how we get the money, we have adequate, we have resident capacity in the district, isn't it? We have resident capacity to do this. Where are we standing? Can we be able to do this by ourselves? That's what we cannot do. Oh, support, but as you are looking for support, don't suffer alone. Don't only look at your district by itself. Put the partners that are over in your districts. Like you have requested, assess, you requested these ones on the directories, but I want to tell you the contract signed under UNF Development Fund to do the same. So go and harmonize. That's what it means. Don't waste resources on the things that are going to be done. The other contract has already been signed. They are going to come and do a digital sharing. And as I evaluate this, maybe we have the gaps, we can come in, isn't it? To support the process, but not to duplicate what the other people are going to be funding and doing, isn't it? Now, all what you have presented is what we do at a national level to the NDCs. Okay? It is just brought down to become area specific. When we are doing the NDCs, we run all these models, but we are doing it at national level, sector level. Get it? And we do them at national level, sector level, to inform us of what goes into our national economic contribution, a discussion which started in the morning, isn't it? So it is that process that we want to bring down, because the law says that the Dccap must be aligned to the National Development Action Plan, which is the NDC, and the NDC must align to the framework strategy, isn't it? So all of what we have done at national level, even at national level, we train the sectors on how to do this. Because if you don't train them on how to do it, that which is needed, they will not give the required information to put in the email of the national issues. So capacity building becomes continuous. So we are trying to just bring it down. So if you want to do now a district NDC, let me use that word, which is the national plan, this has also to be done. Now, as I finalize, I talked about this, the four sectors. What you assure that the information that you have is in a form, because you don't expect that information. Agriculture, forestry, land, isn't it? And the West, you might be collecting that information, but maybe from industry, you might not be collecting information data from them, isn't it? But this is required if you are to profile the display regulations coming out of the industry. That is IPP. Industry, process, and product what? Product use. Maybe you have not been collecting information in terms of payment, isn't it? In transport, it does not be part of your mandate, isn't it? For what is collected. But now, you want to compute emissions on the transport within the district, then do that an obligation must put that. Isn't it? We start collecting. Start not to do emission, then the that. So I think this is what I wanted to finalize with. And this don't explain it as we will do here, but it's just giving you a process what we do. Don't say that this guideline you have not completed the mission. No, it is a guideline. It is just guiding what we need what do we need to do. So how to do it is when you build your capacity to actually do it or get an expert very to work it out. Thank you very much.
So that's how. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's wonderful. Knowledge. The colleague is to do in one day. That would have taken up days. We are grateful for your flexibility in using that share. Colleagues, it is 4. We are agreed to be out of this place by 4. Because I know some of you are like to go so others like as near as access. So my name is Robert Bafika, and I'm here at Progress. First, I want to communicate our sincere thanks to the respective districts local government staff. Here again, we are the first of its kinds, I think, in the local government who have been taken through this guideline. There is intent to make there is more involved with the campus. These are possible. And the commissioner said these Dcaps are informed by another thing, which is NDC. So I want to take this opportunity to inform you. Western region, they did not give consultation in NDC 3.0. NDC is the National Climate Action Plan. Where now these small documents for this climate action plan come from. We don't want to make mistakes with many environment. Any of you who have seen the National Environment Action Plan? Yes, you tell us the year you have seen, sir.
The extent of 2019.
So, the National Environment Action Plan, the recent one, he knows all is written him, but even up now, we have not prepared the National Environment Action Plan. This is why I say failure to plan is planning what? Failure. How many of you have functional district environment and natural resources community? How many of us have communities living in fragile ecosystems? All of us. Now, what helps us to tell our communities these are fragile, these are not? We don't have the district environment action plan because there is no national environment action plan. You are working on the district climate action plan, but you didn't know what guidelines inform you how to make. So as we connect these dots, we want to plan for climate and environment. Ultimately, for the betterment of our people. Some of you, as you take this route, you have seen the people who are closer to the piece of wetland. The question now is, we are asked, how did these people come to? Me, in review, I said, what is there to warn the people this is a wetland? So, this exercise we have done today, one of the key exercises is plan for government. And I'm grateful that we have members of this committee who have come from various districts. And it's our hope. If you didn't budget for this financial year, we are going to implement at least when the supplementary come in the council. One of the supplementary discussed planning for natural resource management.
That said, we'll have a consultation on the third national climate change action plan. And for Western region, say it will start all the way, I think from Hoima, going downwards to Soro and then move towards Lake Victoria up to Mubaraka. So all those districts there will be engaged in that consultation in July. Lastly is logistics. All of you, as you came, my colleague, Mr. notified you that is a modest facilitation. I don't want to call this transport, allowance. Because the new tax, we used to call it the transport allowance until you are defined as almost 20 million because we are not taxing these allowances. Maybe through our note. When we tried what you are saying that we collect from you receipts, to justify the use of the money, many of you could not use it. So the budget came back to us. Now, we have also found an innovative way. We have known without calling it allowance, but a facilitation. The facilitation, for example, you attend this workshop. Since it is more than 100,000, tax. This is why we have given you some forms. My colleague is the add form which gave you. And you are supposed to figure, because that is the figure which is coming in our form. We are trying to run it from paper because the spread is easy. This is why we do cashless payments. WWF and Emily are a list plastic meeting compliant organization. By the way, you have made us save money on the water. We are procured 4 bottles of water, but we are told to consume 1. That is the beauty of innovativeness. Just imagine if at the district you have a dispenser, and you see how much money you are going to save than buying these boxes of water. So these are the small innovations we get. So colleagues, as you are going, this money is going to come to your investor mobile. Now, you are filled on that form and that amount my colleague has called. Last year, there is a form which we will give, it's a feedback form. In this feedback form, it is where we get to know what you like, you dislike, to improve. Sometimes we have been involved in this meeting in sharing, assessing, but in the corridors, we get comments. Why did you make us meet at home? We want to meet in Kampala. So we want to see whether also we want to meet in Kampala before we get another comment. Why don't we meet in Kasese? So we want to get feedback from it for proper planning. Lastly, we have another sister project where we are supporting the number of we are the first track. That we got the establishment of the district environment and natural resources in compliance with the national environment. Still, with the support of the government. They are districts, the community development officers will buy it. This permit, the new one, for the next 5 years, we will see last month. There is not included. And we don't want to follow the law because now the law is so tough on them. We appeal to the district local governments, we have worked with greater very fast, expedite the compliance. My colleague and our lion, what is Sharon? I mean, I in our colleague, you will be seeing us often. We will be visiting a number of CPOs on regularizing our compliance. We have been working in a number of local governments, but without formalizing that compliance requirement. We are waiting for new permit. As you know, we were for elections, you know what NGOs were. Others are still closed. But Emily was elected. We received our permit for the next 5 years in May. But we go with these districts in the GVL. So we are simply requesting you, if you see Shamila coming with a request, don't chase us away that we have been not compliant. We first wanted to get the new permit and then comply, then we amend to include this district with some of we have. So that's it. We want to say that it is a very having the game of, and we look forward to interacting thoroughly for the betterment of our environment and our people, because we cannot remove nature from our life, and we cannot have life without nature. So as we go back to our districts, it is our conviction that these two areas we are doing work on, especially issues of climate change, the issue of the environmental government. You will be the champion to ensure district environment and mental social community functional, being their own, and then the planning development are worked for. So we appeal to all the chief administrative officers that please demand for these plans, demand for the district climate action plan, demand for the district environment action plan. What if we demand them to make us relevant? You see that things we discuss with you can into action. So that's saying I want to invite the representative for the town of Kenya to close our meeting as we are going back from our home. Thank you very much.
For facilitators from the ministry and the development departments, colleagues from the district local government, allow me to extend my appreciation on behalf of participants to the organizing entities, and appreciate the participants for the time dedicated for this noble cause, because we are nothing, I think, without environment. So climate change that affects our environment is affecting us, and I think everybody is feeling it. So it is a responsibility of everyone to really do all that it takes to make sure that we try to mitigate the adverse effects and do as we have been taken through. And on behalf of the participants, I can promise the facilitators that I think we are going to perform to the task to make sure that we all have what it takes to, as far as documentation is concerned. With that, allow me stop here and declare this individual closed.
He is served as we depart. Facilitation will be on your phone. Good.